are now listening to the Film Situation podcast.
Alex Braverman, welcome to the Film Situation podcast.
Thank you. Excited to be here with you.
So I guess tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, I guess professionally speaking, I started out as a cameraman, documentary camera person.
I was watching one of your earlier docs, Making Marines, by the way.
That was the first one.
Yeah, I liked it. I was really into it.
That's crazy that you saw that, or even know how to find that. Yeah, that was the first thing I really did. That was 2001. It was a Discovery Channel 3-part series that followed recruits through their Marine Corps training camp at Parris Island boot camp.
And that was in full disclosure, I was really interested in becoming a Marine at that age, around that time when I was in college at that age. And it was heavy pressure from my family not to do that. I think just out of fear. They were like, oh, you're going to be sent to war and get killed. And, just like how a lot of parents would feel in a situation like that.
Well, yeah, I mean, that was an interesting thing that happened is while we were filming, I think I started filming that in like May or June of 2001. And so all the recruits that we were following going through this process, figured, all right, I'm going to join the Marines. I'm going to do 4 years. I'm going to get my college paid for. And while they were at boot camp, we had 9/11. And, they don't get a lot of news during training, but that news made it through into the barracks. And so all these kids that sort of signed up thinking that they were getting into it for one thing, it became very real. They could end up in combat. But yeah, that's how my career started. I was still in college when I was working on that. And
where'd you grow up, Alex?
I grew up in Los Angeles, lived here till I was 18, and then went to NYU to study film.
Oh, cool.
And with the, I got there with the intention that I was going to study narrative scripted filmmaking, but I just got pulled into documentary. A few opportunities came up, where it was like someone needed a sound person on a doc shoot and I was doing sound, and someone needed a camera person on a doc shoot. So I would start shooting, and I got really drawn into the immediacy of that and never really ended up pursuing scripted narrative filmmaking. Just was hooked on documentary from the beginning.
It's so funny. I have kind of the opposite story. I thought I was going to be a documentary filmmaker and got into the narrative side of things. Somehow.
Well, it's like 25 years later, and I'm now trying to figure out how to go in the other direction towards scripted, away from documentary.
Do you still have? Yeah. You have the desire to do scripted?
I do, just because the documentary world is, we can get into this as much or as little as you want, but like, there's been so many great documentaries made, but in terms of like financing and distribution, I hate to use the word the market, but like the market is kind of bleak at the moment. And it just feels like the documentaries that get financed and distributed so often are the same thing over and over again. And I feel like on the low budget side of things, or the independent side of things, if you have a really great idea and you can go out and do it by yourself, there's still so much to explore. But the sort of heyday of prestige funded documentary filmmaking is, I won't say it's over, but it's on a pause for sure, at least as far as I can tell.
I don't know if it's much better on the narrative side of things right now.
You're right. It's I don't think it is either, but it does feel like, and maybe this is naive, but feels like you can maybe get closer to the truth or telling the truth in a scripted manner than it is in a documentary manner. In a way.
Well, I'd be curious to see what from following your work, and we'll get into it in a minute, but I got exposed to your work from watching Thank You Very Much, the film about Andy Kaufman, which I highly recommend to everybody. I saw it on MUBI, by the way, so I guess that's a plug for MUBI. And like I said, we'll get into that in a minute, but I would like to see you do a narrative project. I would watch it.
That's incredibly kind. Thank you.
So like growing up, like when did you first know that you wanted to gravitate toward film and production?
Well, it's a little cliche, but growing up in Los Angeles, you know, there's just, that is the industry that I was exposed to the most. Both my parents worked in film and television, and there's just so much that they exposed me to, and so much that you could see easily here growing up, between the Cinerama Dome and all the great screening rooms across the city showing incredible movies, like art house films, big blockbusters. But in particular, I have a memory of going to the Cinerama Dome with my dad and
That
seeing
place
a
is great,
screening.
by the way. I love that
It
place.
was the best. It was
Yeah.
the best.
It's no
And
longer
it's
there,
still,
right?
well, it's there. It's just not open.
Gotcha.
No one's operating it at the moment, and its future
Oh,
is
that's
uncertain, but
unfortunate.
it is there. But he took me to a screening of this Western called The Wild Bunch.
Oh, Sam Peckinpah.
And
Okay.
yeah, incredible movie. And I didn't know anything about it or know who Sam Peckinpah was at the time, but I just left the movie as like an 11 or 12-year-old, really blown away by the shots and like the way it was filmed. And I started talking to my dad, and he introduced me to the concept of like a cinematographer or a director of photography, and working with the director and designing the look of a movie. And this idea that, you know, as a kid, movies aren't just dropped out of thin air. Like, you have to figure out where to put the camera and where it's going to go from there and who it's focused on and all that. And that really, like, even though I loved movies before that, that was the first film I ever saw that really had me thinking that it
That
was a
left like
craft.
kind of impression on you. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, like the idea that that's something that you could learn how to do and figure out and study and train, and that could be your life. You know, that you could think about those things and be in charge of them. And that was such a fun revelation for me. And I think that kind of got the ball rolling as far as me thinking like that's something I want to do.
That's awesome. So how did you, I guess, on the Andy Kaufman film, how did that come about? Were you always a fan of his? How did that project get developed?
Yeah. I have always been a fan of his, and but I was always a little confused by him, to be honest. Cause like all
Same.
you get are if you're just a kid growing up in the 80s or 90s or now, you know, there's only snippets and tidbits and rumors and legends. It's not like someone like, who had a really cohesive career, who you understood what they were about from day one. You
Right.
know, you
That
get
was
like,
by design, of course.
for sure. So for me, there's like some of the SNL skits. There's the Carnegie Hall show. There's his special, his ABC special. And then there's just rumors and legends and everything. And I think so. I was always a little bit confused of who the real Andy was, as was everyone. But then, you know, you learn that he was a wrestler, but he also campaigned for Jerry Brown, but he was also a busboy at Jerry's Deli. And so it just kind of shocked me that, going back to talking about the market, you know, every documentary made is like biography of this person, biography of this person. And even though we have Jim and Andy, which is like an incredible film about Jim Carrey becoming Andy Kaufman for Man on the Moon, and we have that, and we have Man on the Moon, but there's this perception out there that there's like all these Andy Kaufman documentaries, but there wasn't one at all. Like it occurred to me in 2016, 2017, that, you know, he didn't really get his due in that way, and that no one had really tried to weave together a portrait of him that made sense of his life chronologically, you know, tried to get at why he was the way he was, how he became this performer that we know, and then what happened to him throughout his career and what it means for us now. So that was the origin of like why I wanted to tell a story about this guy. And also, like, yeah, I was a fan. I thought he was cool. Like, I think anything that you could never really fully explain or understand is like the coolest thing imaginable.
Yeah, I think that's a good point because if somebody asked me, "Well, what do you love about Andy Kaufman?" I don't know if I would be able to easily articulate that, you know? I mean, he was definitely such a multifaceted sort of guy, and I just liked how he fucked with people, honestly, like, I think it, which is kind of very specific. He had, like, such a specificity to him that it's, your film captured really well.
Well, for me, like if someone asked me what I love about him, it's that he's kind of impossible to crack and figure out. And so there's always reasons, there's always more to explore. There's always reasons to keep thinking about him. He's always reflecting back something about our current age that's new because, his work was kind of timeless in a way.
Right, it was
And
yeah, it definitely was timeless.
so, you could think about like what he was doing in terms of how it relates to the 70s and 80s when he was doing it, but like it means something different in the 90s and the 2000s. And now, 2026, it means something different. And so that timelessness is pretty evergreen. And there's this great line in the movie from Laurie Anderson where she basically says, he was a mirror.
Yes.
He's a mirror to us and how we see ourselves. And so that's
I think
what I love about him. He's
really
like
well
this
put. Yeah.
endless riddle.
So in high school, I feel like we're similar ages, but I was in high school in the late 90s, and I was the first kid, I think, in my high school to have a DVD player when they were expensive as shit at that time. I was working actually as an editor for a small production company that did like events like weddings and bar mitzvahs and things like that. And so I was like making $5 an hour, and I saved all my money to buy the $750 DVD player like in 1998 or something. Or like when they were like pretty brand new. And Man on the Moon.
Yeah.
At that time, I don't know if you recall, but there wasn't a vast selection of DVDs. It was almost like whatever was the rack at like Suncoast or whatever store was like they had like a specific section of DVDs when they were pretty new. But Man on the Moon was, I think, one of the first movies that I bought on DVD. Or I guess that was the next year in '99. So maybe I was like starting to build a collection at that point. But what I remember was watching it with my family, and I'd seen it already, but I was watching the movie with my parents who hadn't seen it before. Well, I guess this is the first time we're watching it. And toward the very end of the movie, the last 5 minutes of the movie, the DVD player just broke. And the screen went black. And my parents were like, is this part of the thing? Is this supposed to be? I was like, no, I don't think so. I think the DVD player just legitimately broke, but it was just like at this time in the movie where
That's perfect.
Yeah, it was perfect.
Yeah. That is perfect. I mean, yeah, that he, in his ABC special, which was pulled from airing at the time, that happens, midway through the special or 2/3 of the way, the special static lines in the TV form and the signal goes out. And that's part of why I think it never aired is because Fred Silverman, who was running ABC at the time, was like, the whole point of television is for people to not change the channel. And if you make them think that, there's something wrong with the broadcast, they're going to change the channel and we've lost them. And that was like, obviously the genius of Andy is he thought that was hilarious and perfect, but
Right.
yeah.
And I love the interviews that you had with Lynn Margiles and Bob Zamuda. I thought they were really strong. And
Thank you.
captured kind of really like the essence of like their relationship with him. And actually I don't know if this is a spoiler, but the revelation that Andy Kaufman was really close with his grandpa as a young kid, and then his parents lying to him that he didn't die, that was kind of like really hit like a ton of bricks of like, oh, okay, like, that definitely made a major impact on him in his his relationship with kind of deception and
Yeah. I mean, as the story is told, he went quite a while believing that his grandfather was still alive. And when he discovered that he was dead, that was it, you know, who knows what the actual thought process was that he had, but it's this moment in his life when he realizes, you know, it's what you believe that defines your reality, not necessarily the facts themselves. And I think that's sort of aha moment for him is, you know, you can control reality based on your own narratives and beliefs, and you know, whatever's true to you is true.
And that's a narrative that's only more pervasive as time has gone on. Like nowadays, it's
Oh
really
yeah.
people are. I mean, there's record numbers of people that I think are questioning if space is real,
Yeah.
or if like the world. Like I think there's like a surge of people that think the Earth is flat lately. You know what I mean? It's like, well, that's something I'm really concerned with. Is just like with like deep fakes and like AI, it's like,
Hmm.
like now I'll see like posts and people are like, "Oh, that's AI." They say like in times where it's not, for sure. I'm like, "Man, that's gonna be this is just the beginning of this. This is gonna be a major problem."
Yeah, we're screwed. I
Yeah.
mean, and also just like like president is one of these people that believes that if you repeat something that you want to be true enough times, then not only will people believe it, but that it becomes true. And
It's
that's
like
something
fake
that
it
he,
till you make it. So,
yeah, yeah,
yeah, it's definitely that sort of society that we're
yeah,
moving in, and, yeah, Andy Kaufman was definitely ahead of his time because it seems like he saw it all coming, sorta, you know?
agreed.
And then, yeah, just like I didn't even know that he was into TM and like transcendental meditation. That was really fascinating as well. Um,
Yeah. I, well, I had always known that he was into TM, but I didn't really understand what the connection was between that practice of his and his life and work. And so that was one of the things that we spent quite a bit of time trying to figure out while making the film. And ultimately, you know, because the Man on the Moon mentions that he meditated, and it was like a known thing, but a lot of people meditate, you know, and I didn't really understand why it was always brought up with him, but never really deeply explored. And so when we were making the film, we traveled to Fairfield, Iowa, which is the sort of spiritual home of TM in the United States. It's where Maharishi International University is, and Andy spent a lot of time in Iowa. Some of the people in the film, and when we were there and we interviewed this guy Buzz, who was his friend, Buzz tells the story of Andy meeting Maharishi and getting a chance to ask him a question about the nature of comedy. And it's a cool story, and it does really tie together everything that, you know, it ties together these loose ends of understanding how meditation affected his life and his comedy. This idea that, you know, we're looking for contrast between one creative event and another. But then as we were leaving, Buzz is like, you know what? I think I have a recording of that conversation. And that's how it found its way into the
that's
film. And it was just a very lucky,
yeah.
very, very lucky break for us. Because without that, I don't really know if it's not, if it's a story worth telling, if you just have a story about a story. But here we actually found this incredible moment where they meet
No,
and get a chance to
yeah,
discuss.
that was really cool. That because I was surprised myself seeing that. I'm like, wow, that's amazing. That's documented.
Yeah. Yep.
Because it's like when you were first hearing about the story as you're watching the film, it was like unexpected that it was actually going to show it.
Totally. Unexpected to me too.
Um, yeah, I just think like perception, that's something that's kind of something I play with in my work. Like I made a narrative feature film where like it's told in 4 different chapters and kind of like the different perception of the same events, characters are, slightly skewed. And I think that's something that I know that you had produced the more recent film, the Stanford Prison Experiment, and I want to ask you about that in a minute. But I guess actually staying with thank you very much. Like I saw also at the end of the movie that it was produced by the Safdie brothers, that they were involved in it. So that's
Mhm.
cool. How did that come about?
Well, early on, before making the film, the first thing that happened on the movie was I interviewed Bob Zamuda and Lynn Margulies. So like the interviews that you see in the film with them, those interviews are from May 2017. That was this sort of start of putting together the movie. It was just sort of getting that baseline of information and storytelling from them. And I used that footage, I cut it together into something short and used that footage to sort of bring on partners and raise money. And the first person that I went out to even discuss anything relating to the movie was Josh Safdie. And that's just because I knew from Instagram and friends that knew him, and that's probably, I can't remember if there were other reasons as well, but I knew from at least from friends and from Instagram that he was like a huge Andy Kaufman fan. And I also knew that he and his brother and their friends used to have this collective called Red Bucket Films, where they would basically make these videos on the streets of New York that were like kind of Kaufman-esque, in the sense that, like, you know, there would be a hidden camera on a bus, a crowded New York City bus, and then a bunch of their friends would get on the bus in different costumes and stuff. And someone's filming, and, like, you know, a baby, one of them's holding a baby on the bus, and the other one is like, "Hey, make that baby stop crying." And then another one's like, "Hey, you shut up, like, leave them alone." And it's like a
Social
play.
experiment almost.
Yeah, it's like they're putting on a play on the bus and no one knows that they're actors or that it's being filmed. And it's like, that's just a very Kaufman-esque thing to do. Like Bob and Andy would sometimes used to go into, it's like they'd go to the zoo and one of them will be like, "Oh my God, the lion escaped." And they'd start running and everyone would start running. Or there's a story in the movie where, like, Lynn and Andy would get up to a red light in the car and he would pretend to start choking her just to freak out the person in the next car over. So, like, anyway, I've seen a lot of these videos that Josh and Benny and their friends had made as part of Red Bucket Films. And so I knew at the very least that he would probably be interested in knowing more about the project. And so, yeah, he was extremely cool and friendly and enthusiastic and wrote me back very quickly saying, like, "This is great. Like, I'd love to see any other material you have." And so it just sort of started a mutual appreciation in our relationship for all things Kaufman. And ultimately they came on as producers and were incredibly helpful in first of all, in getting the movie made and shaping the narrative and helping me in post and giving notes on the edit. And they were great. They were the best.
That's awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely a fan of their work and sort of,
Mhm.
I want to say almost like an early adopter. Like, you know, I've definitely been following their work for a very long time at this point.
Yeah.
So that was kind of a nice, but like, it was when I saw the end credits, I'm like, of course, Josh and Benny Safdie produced something like this, you know.
Yeah.
But it's
They-
also, I mean, like, you know, it's a testament to your film too, because it's just like, it was just a very high quality film. And
Thank you.
one thing that was that you kind of play with was just like, because he was such a prankster, and just like the whole notion of him potentially faking his death is that something that you think there is that something you feel certain, like, okay, no, he definitely died at like the age, what was it, like 37? He was pretty young when he died, but
It's 35.
35. Wow, he was so young. Like, do you feel like proof positive he died at 35, or was there questions in your own mind of like, did this guy fake his own death?
I've never thought he faked his death, and I've always believed that he was dead. But at the same time, that concept is just part of his act. And it's part of, you know, the art that he leaves behind. He wanted us talking about that. So I feel like I talk about it in those terms, where it's like, you know, what does it mean to live for whatever, you know what I mean? Like
Right.
in the sense that we continue to talk about it, like he lives on, and that's an interesting concept. And I think he laid the groundwork throughout his life for us to be questioning that. But I don't have personally any doubts that he got cancer and got sick and did
I
not
think the only thing,
overcome that.
that's how I took it from your film. I think it was just like after watching your film, then reading more up about him, that Lynn and Bob, I guess, supposedly wrote a book, and I didn't read the book, but supposedly they were saying that he did fake his death, and I don't know if that's supposed to be tongue in cheek or it's supposed to be literal. So that was the only thing that was like, wait a minute. I was like, is there something here?
Well, yeah, they did write a book. They also kind of took some heat for that. And some people, including, I want to say in Andy's family, were upset that it felt like, just exploiting an opportunity, but they've sort of since retracted a lot of that. And the truth of the matter is, like, especially now we're,
Like 40 plus years.
2026. Yeah. Like he's been dead longer than he was ever alive. I don't hear them saying things like that anymore. And the film, in a way, is as close as I think we'll get to having them say, okay, he died. But, Lynn in the movie says, it's sad when someone dies. So I think she's basically there. And with Bob, he says in the movie, if he hadn't died, what he would have been working on was faking his own death. So in a sense, I think everyone's on the same page and has now admitted he did not fake his death. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think when Danny DeVito was in the film and he said a cast member, like literally, like thought it was a gag until they touched his body,
Yeah, poked him.
I was like, oh man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious because we're, we grew up both in the 90s. We're like kids at that time. So were you like a fan of like The State on MTV and stuff like that?
Oh yeah. I love The State.
I love The State as well.
Yeah. State,
That's kind of like
Kids in the Hall.
Yeah, the Kids in the Hall. That was the era.
Taco Mailman.
Yeah. I used to do the Kids in the Hall thing. Like if I had detention in class, I would do that to the teacher. Like there was a teacher named Mr. Greenfield. I'm like, Steph, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm crushing your head.
Yeah, smushing your head. Yeah. Do you remember the Taco Mailman on The State?
I don't know if I remember the Taco Mailman. I've definitely seen every episode of The State.
The normal mailman, he's delivering packages, and then he comes to the mailbox and he just puts these tacos in instead of the mail, and the couple comes down to the street and they're like, but hey man, like just wanted you to know, we love the tacos. The tacos are delicious. Tacos are incredible, but like we kind of miss getting the mail.
Yeah, I do remember that.
Yeah.
That was great. And I remember Louie and
oh yeah, of course.
And Doug. The Doug character.
No, I love The State. You make me want to go and watch The State all again.
One of my favorite segments ever of The State was this dude that's dressed up like a clown, but he's a producer at a show. They're like, I don't know, like we just had it's like the host quit of this children's show. We don't know who's gonna do it. He's like, I should do it. Like they're like, I don't know if you're qualified. He's like, but I look like a fucking blueberry.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that was a huge influence at the time.
Yeah. I actually thought comedy was going to be my lane when I first got into filmmaking. So I was like filming different stand-up comedians in New York and things like that. And, but I kind of, it seems like gritty crime films became more my lane. But that's just how the cookie crumbles, I guess, sometimes. So I also watched the Stanford Prison Experiment, Unlocking the Truth. We're a producer on it. What was your involvement in that project? And
so Juliet Eisner, who was the director of that, and the other EP, like during the moment of COVID where it was like the George Floyd moment, like June 2020, I'm thinking, when there were a lot of reports on the news about George Floyd and how could this happen? And, how could a police officer and police department get to this place with this guy that did, like all the news reports that we were, not all of them, but some of the news reports that we were watching, Juliet and I mentioned the Stanford prison experiment because it is such a ubiquitous social experiment in our history where it sort of like explains how someone doing their job could, how the situation could get out of hand and they could lose control. So the Stanford prison experiment becomes this sort of reference that gets trotted out at times to help us understand why people behave certain ways in certain situations. And so we started looking into it and, it gets referenced. It's been referenced dozens of times over the last 50 years, including Abu Ghraib. Like, how could these prison guards abuse these prisoners in such a way? Rwanda, like, how could these neighbors, how could these people in Rwanda be so murderous towards their own neighbors and so on and so forth? So we started looking into it and found that, there was a film called The Stanford Prison Experiment, which sort of dramatizes what happens over the course of those days. And there were so many interviews with Phil Zimbardo, who was the scientist who put the experiment together, of him sort of explaining where the idea came from and everything. But like Juliet discovered that most of the people that played prisoners and guards in the experiment, no one had ever spoken to them and no one really knew their names. And she's just like this very curious and tenacious investigative person who, like, once she discovers something like that, she just can't stop thinking about it and is very good at finding people. And so she did some digging and like figured out who all these people were and started calling them. And once she got them on the phone, after asking, how did you find me? They basically just told her like the story that you've heard about the Stanford prison experiment up until this point is like not the full story. And we were basically told what to do. So once you hear that, you're kind of like, oh my God, like not only have we been sort of getting a very specific filtered take on this like ubiquitous social experiment, but our understanding of how to think about all these big world events from George Floyd to Abu Ghraib to Vietnam and so on and so forth, like we've been looking at it using this narrative that is, if not false, just incomplete. And so that's how the project came to be, is, essentially just Juliet just making this discovery. And then along the way, also finding this French social scientist named Thibault, who was sort of on the same path himself. And it was further along and had done all this research. And she basically turned to him to help us tell the story as well. So
Well,
that's how it came to be.
Well, I really enjoyed it. And I think what was great about it was that it also took a nuanced perspective. It wasn't like bang, like, you know what I mean? Like Phil Zimbardo is just like a complete villain and he was an evil guy. Like I felt like showing also his perspective from the thing, like I feel like it depicted all the angles of it in a really unique and interesting sort of way.
Yeah. I'm glad you said that. And I think, Juliet would be glad to hear you say that too, because throughout the making of the film, and, getting to know Phil a little bit and really looking at what happened on each of those days, like we also really loved Phil and like, there's a possibility that he might've been right about all these things too. It's just that his methodology was not scientific,
Right.
in the sense that like, he claims that he got so involved in the experiment that he started believing that he was the, prison warden or whatever. And it's like, that's just not how science works. Like you can't, that's just
Right.
a good story.
It is a good story, and I think the film really covered that really well, the series, and, it kind of even when it brought the former participants together and they were kind of debating that amongst themselves, I thought, like,
Yeah.
different people had different impressions of the event, and, I think it did show like, there's that one guy that kinda had a softer approach on it versus like, "Yeah, I think something was uncovered here," um, and then
Well,
versus, like,
it's
one of the
like,
other guys, it's
it's,
like, "No, Phil's an asshole," like that sort of thing, you know?
yeah. Well, and it's like, they're probably all right. You know what I
Right,
mean? Like,
right, and that's how life
and
is,
that's
you know?
exactly. There's an incredible line though in that show that I think about when I think about Andy too. One of the participants, the one who was sort of forced to go into the hole, which was like solitary confinement, and uh, his name is Clay, and the other guy Jerry was banging on the doors of the hole, and it was because Dave, John Wayne, the evil prison guard, like told him to do that. And anyway, he basically has this line in the show where he's talking about the difference between how something would affect you if it's real versus if it's like in a play or something like that. And he says, all life is real life. And I thought that
Right.
was such a like profound thing to say, where like it doesn't matter the reasons why this happened, or, if it was fake or staged or whatever, like it happened
I
and it
thought that was
affected
equal
me.
absolutely, I thought that was equally profound because he's like, "Hey, here's my moral stance on this, and that's it," there's no
Yeah.
gray areas, and it was really interesting just hearing sort of that perspective, like, you don't like, you're not off the hook just because you thought
Yeah.
this was, like, make believe.
Just because someone told you to.
But then the other guy too, I don't think the John Wayne character, I don't think he was necessarily an evil guy either. I don't think you could just see a portion of him and, if you just saw him behaving as the guard, you're like, "Yeah, this guy might be a sociopath," but maybe not, like, I think there's validity to him being in character and, like, there was a heavy-handed push of whatever he was doing?
Yeah, I agree. He's not a bad guy at all.
Yeah, so, yeah, no, I thought it was a really interesting series for sure. Was that something like that I'm always curious about. Was it developed as, like, initially as a three-part series, or was it like a standalone documentary film and then it became a series after a certain
Yeah.
like, because it got picked up by a certain network or that kinda thing?
Yeah. If memory serves, I believe that Juliet wanted to make it as a feature documentary. And the company that we were working with, which is called Muck, they were on board with that. Um, but, we pitched it to a handful of places. Nat Geo ended up being the place that was most interested in doing it. And I think for whatever reason, they were just like, could you do this as a three-part series? And we looked at the pros and cons of doing it both ways. And ultimately there's just like, with a three-part series instead of a movie, like that does afford you certain room to explore certain parts of the story. And it gives you a structure that you wouldn't be able to do with the movie. And so when they asked that, even though we weren't thinking about doing that originally, we went away and thought about it and was like, finally came back and was like, you know what? I think, yeah, we could do that and it would be cool. Like,
Yeah, it worked. It definitely worked
yeah,
because there's some listen, I'm sure you felt the same way, like, there's some of these things on Netflix and things like that where you're like, "Okay, like, you guys are just drawing this out just because you want
yeah,
a multi-part thing," and this wasn't like that at all. Like, each episode was like, "Oh, that was really interesting," Like, by the 3rd
yeah,
one, because after the 2nd one, it could have felt like a completed thing, but then the 3rd one, you're like, "Whoa, now it's interviewing Phil, and it's
yeah,
going to his backstory, and then the reenactment, and then everybody it was just it came together very well, for sure.
Yeah. It makes you think about telling the story in a different way too. Like, I think we always wanted it to be a reveal that we had Phil too. The way that you reveal that in a movie is so different than the way that you would reveal it in a 3-part series. And
Right. It was
it
a
was,
surprising reveal. It was like, whoa, they
yeah,
actually got him, and
they
I think I
got him.
looked it
Yeah.
up. He had passed away 2 years ago. So
He died like right before this came out. Um,
yeah.
it was finished before he died, but yeah, he died right before it came out.
Were you there for the shooting of that as well? Were you there on set?
Yeah. Yeah. That was, also, I want to say that was like the end of 2020, beginning of 2021. Like, I feel like we interviewed him on December 31st, 2020.
It looked like
And
he had
then
an
went,
ocean view house, like outside the window,
he,
like he lived by the beach or something.
he lived, do you know, in San Francisco, Lombard Street, that curvy street that is like super famous, steep hill?
Gosh, I've only been to San Francisco once, and I was near is it near the Golden Gate Bridge, like that neighborhood?
It's not far. It's just, he lives on like the most famous street in San Francisco,
Gotcha.
where it's like a very steep, windy, like if you look at it from satellite, it looks like a snake. And he lived like on that and has like an incredible 4-story house, or three or 4-story house that's like has ocean views. And so, yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah. And you're a documentary filmmaker, like your approach
Yeah.
to editing documentary film. For instance, on Thank You Very Much,
Yeah.
did you have just so much footage? Was it just a challenge of like, all right, we have to condense this down into a feature, and just you had so much good stuff that couldn't even make the film, or each
Yeah.
project is different in that sort of regard?
Well, each project is different. I think like, you mentioned the Safdies, but the other person that I worked with, day in, day out on the movie, aside from my editor, was Morgan Neville, who, as a documentary filmmaker, is pretty unmatched in terms of like how well his stories are told. Like, the Lorne Michaels documentary that came out this week, that was directed by Morgan. The Paul McCartney one called Man on the Run came out a few weeks, maybe a month or 2 ago. That was him. He did the Steve Martin documentary called Steve, and also made the Bourdain film called Roadrunner. Like, he's just an incredible documentary filmmaker.
Sounds like
But
he's a
I made,
prolific guy too.
that's true. But this film was edited in his office, so he was like down the hall. And I think the only reason I mention that is that like he's really good about being in service to the story more than the footage itself, and is constantly like reminding me and my editor to like pull things out. The more that you can pull out, the stronger what remains is. Probably a more grammatically correct way of saying that is like, the story that you want to tell is stronger if you don't have too much competing noise in there. And so, as a Kaufman enthusiast and fan, like, I want, of course, everyone to see all this material that I've had a chance to see, and I want to be able to share all these clips that no one's had a chance to see before. But like, more important than that, I want to get the story of his life and his work correct. And so it's really about like not choosing what to include, because that would be, if I could, I would include everything. It's really about like, what should we take out to make this other material even stronger? So, and then it's an issue of structuring. Like, I always knew that I wanted to start the movie with like the birth of his career. And then I wanted the middle of the movie to be about his like childhood and early life. And the end of the movie to be about the latter half of his career. Like, that was something that I just knew, because I think if you're coming to an Andy Kaufman movie and you don't know who he is, you don't care about his childhood at all.
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
But if you're coming to an Andy Kaufman movie and you don't know who he is, and you're presented with what he was like on stage as an audience member that knew nothing about him, like, you're going to be hooked. So it's like, let's learn who he is as a performer before we learn who he is as a person.
No, I think that was a good approach. And I was watching it again as a second time just for in preparation
Mm-hmm.
this discussion, and I was like, it rewards repeat watchability as well. So it was
Well,
like,
the editors that I worked with were incredible. Like I worked with one editor for the first half of the edit, this guy named Jared Jeter, and he is like a super stylish editor and like great with music and very funny. Um, and then for the second half, I worked with a guy named Alan Lowe, who often works with Morgan. Um, and he's just great with story and pacing and flow, and their styles worked really well together. But yeah, the edit is, it's like the hardest part of documentary filmmaking, but it's also the most fun and most rewarding. And it's where, that's where your film gets made.
yeah, because sometimes have you had the experience on any past projects where you thought it was going to go one way and then the narrative of the story is taking shape in the edit in a specific way?
It's a good question. Well, nothing immediately comes to mind, but I will say that working on Thank You Very Much on the edit, the earliest versions of that film, the earliest edits, when it got to the part of his career where things started to go downhill, where he wasn't getting booked on shows anymore and he was sort of getting canceled by TM and thrown off SNL and all these things, like the early cut of the movie sort of it felt like that was a bad thing and he was upset about that. And then I remember we showed an early cut to our producers, and Josh Safdie and Ronald Bronstein, when they saw it, were kind of like, this doesn't feel right or true. And it's because like Andy was actually like loving that stuff. Like that. And that was like part of the act as well too. It's like, so as a filmmaker, I was kind of guilty of repeating a story structure that I had seen in every other film I had ever seen. And they were so good about pointing out to me of like, no, like those were like the best times of his life when he was really bombing. And like, we went back and looked at some of the footage, and like everyone that we had interviewed had said that, like his friends, his collaborators, his managers, his girlfriends, they were all saying like, no, these are the happiest times of his life. And I think it just sort of speaks to how vigilant and alert you need to stay in the edit, and not just tell like a familiar story that you've told before, but like, I guess what I'm saying is the surprise was sort of, oh yeah, like that's not where this narrative is going. In fact, like
Yeah.
it's not like the bottom of the well, it's like a climax.
Right. And I guess that's also a testament of you having some fresh eyes on it with Josh Safdie and Ronald Bronstein. Like, couldn't probably ask for better people than that
Well,
to
it's like
give
why you have
feedback.
producers.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Like
exactly.
it's why you need to like collaborate and have a team around you of people that are paying attention and that you trust and that are as invested in the film as you.
I'm really big on that. I'm writing a script right now, and I'm very big into workshopping the script on a table read, because even if it's somebody challenges something that you are very adamant about, then what you fight for, and then what it's like, wait a minute, maybe people have a point here, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the fights that you get into over the smallest things, like whether you win or lose, they're very illuminating because they're representing like an audience. There's things that like the biggest, I wouldn't call it a fight, but like the longest running debate in the film. It's like in the very beginning, when he's talking about, my movie, there's a climax and then there's an ending, and then we cut to black. We like cut to black, and amongst our team, it was like, how long should we cut to black? Should it be like 5 seconds? Should it be 10 seconds? Should it be 20 seconds? Should it be a full minute? Like he says, and we tried every possible version of that you could imagine.
I'm glad you're bringing this up, because I was thinking about that on the second watch, and you did it the perfect amount of time, because it absolutely should not have been a full minute. There's no
Right. But some people would say it absolutely should have been a full minute. And we like copped out by doing less than that, I think it ended up being 11 seconds.
Yeah. I don't know. I think a full minute would have been way too much. I
Yeah.
think so. It would have been off-putting.
It's like,
Even if it would have been in the spirit of maybe something he would have done himself, it's still too much for it's too much of an ask for an audience.
see, this is the point, is that everyone has a different feeling about this. Like I think I would have liked to have tried a minute. There were some people that felt that it was too long at 11 seconds as is. I mean, should we just feel what 11 seconds feels like real quick? I'll do a stopwatch.
Yeah,
You ready?
I have my timer right now. Okay. So 11 seconds
That's
is
11 seconds.
it's a long time when you're waiting for the 11 seconds to end. So if you're asking your audience to wait for a minute to end, I mean, it's one thing if you're Stanley Kubrick and it's 2001: A Space Odyssey, there's just a black screen, but people are in the theater at that point and they're hearing the noise.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? I think of just like a full minute of absolute silence. I don't know. It would have been too much.
Well, this movie came out in the theater. I don't know. It's hard. This is the point. It's like, it's fun to have these kinds of debates. But yeah, that's one of the ones where we talked about it on every single phone call.
So you mentioned your colleague before, I guess your co-producer, was it, that mentioned the concept of pulling things out?
Yeah. Morgan.
Morgan. So I watched this video last week on YouTube, just on the late night. It just like popped into my feed about organization, about there was a Swedish woman that was talking about how she has an organizing business where it's totally different in Europe than it is in America, because in North America, I guess just people have just so much crap that they have to have bigger houses, and then the big houses aren't enough. So then they have storage spaces, and the storage industry has like been a huge industry. But in Sweden, people naturally have this concept called legume, which I'd never heard of, but it was this concept of pulling things out that don't enhance your life. There's not like a direct translation of it in English, but I just thought it was a really interesting concept of, just like pulling things out. And like, you don't always need to add more things, you know? And I don't know, I just thought that was really interesting. And like that you're mentioning that in terms of like your film, like that sort of concept.
Well, it's like Jenga, basically. Does the overall structure that you're trying to, how much can you pull out and retain structural integrity before it collapses? And I think when we get to a place in the edit, you know, the director and the editor, when you get to a place where it's like, okay, this is like, this is making sense. It's feeling full. It's feeling complete. You know, the edit is like 110 minutes long. Like, can we get it down to like 95 minutes, 99 minutes, 89 minutes, and it still has the same overall effect on the audience, but like, we're not asking them to sit through all of these details that are so fascinating to us and don't actually make the film better. Like that's a huge part of the process. And I think some filmmakers don't want to hear that and don't want to be pushed in that direction by their producers. But at the end of the day, like, I don't know, I kind of love walking out of a 90-minute movie instead of like if a movie can handle it, you know what I mean? Like, if it deserves to be longer, sure. But
a lot of times I select which movie I'm going to watch based off the running time, because I have young kids, and you know, by the time me and my wife throw on a movie, sometimes it's on the later side. So I'm like, I can't throw on a 3-hour Paul Thomas Anderson movie, even though I love them. But like, I can't, you know, it might not, you know, give me a good 90-minute lean running time and I'm in. So I guess what's next on the agenda for you? Are you working on anything that you could talk about?
not really, only not out of some sort of secrecy reason, but more just because I'm not sure what the next one to go is. Like I'm developing a handful of things, and it's possible that all of them could happen. It's possible that none of them could happen. And I have a weird jinxing spirit about talking about things before they're a done deal. Because then if they go away, I'll be
Probably a wise move.
too sad. Yeah.
I've definitely been guilty of that. Sometimes I've tried to become better about that in more recent years, but I think I would definitely somebody that gets overly excited and talks sometimes too much about ideas.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, if any of them become real, then I'll let you know all about it.
Yeah, you're always invited back. And so I'm going to ask you one question that I ask each guest. And a lot of times, in full disclosure, I ask people ahead of time, but sometimes I do it popcorn style like this. But
Okay.
what are two of your favorite movie scenes from any films of all time? And it doesn't have to be absolute favorite. I always say, like, don't overthink it. It's just like, what two scenes do you like for any reasons? And it could be a narrative film. It could be a documentary.
There's a scene in The Heartbreak Kid, the original Heartbreak Kid with Charles Grodin, Sybil Shepherd, where, have you seen that movie?
No, but I like Charles Grodin.
It's an incredible movie directed by Elaine May. It's basically about a guy who meets this woman that he becomes obsessed with and falls in love with while he's on his honeymoon. So he gets married, and then he and his wife go on their honeymoon, and then while they're in Florida, he fixates and becomes infatuated with Sybil Shepherd. But there's a scene in that movie where he goes out to dinner with Sybil Shepherd and her parents for the first time, and he's explaining to them that he's in love with her and he wants to be with her, but there's only this slight hiccup, which is that he's married. He just got married last week. And just the looks on the parents' faces as he's trying to justify that. That's a scene. That's one of my favorite scenes in any movie. And then
I definitely got to watch it.
I also really love, there's a scene in the movie, the documentary, The Cruise.
Oh,
by Bennett Miller. Have you seen that
Bennett
film?
Miller. Yeah.
Yeah. There's
Yeah.
a scene in that where he's like walking around and he comes across, I want to say, it's been a while since I've seen it, but
Guy's
the way
name
that I
was
remember
Speed.
it,
His nickname was
Speed Levitch, yeah.
Speed Levitch, yeah.
But he comes across this flower and he's talking about admiring the flower, but that he wants the flower to admire him as well. And that strikes me as well. Those are the two scenes that immediately come to mind for me.
Nice. I haven't even thought about that movie, The Cruise, in a very long time. So I'm glad you're putting that back into the zeitgeist here.
Yeah. No, I would like to
Watch
watch The Cruise again.
Bennett Miller should make some more documentaries. I feel like
From what I understand, he has he has worked on some. I don't know when they are coming out or if now. I'm just looking at the release date of The Cruise. Yeah, October 1998. But you're right. I mean, The Cruise is like, yeah, it's one of my favorite movies of all time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love Bennett Miller. I love The Cruise. It's incredible. That's another one where I haven't spoken to him about this, but I've been told that film was edited multiple times and that the original versions of it are like completely different in terms of his, arc as a character, and that and they went back and recut it and it really came together. But
yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Good choices. And Alex, really appreciate you being on the podcast.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to talk to you, and hope that was interesting.
Thank you for listening to the Film Situation podcast with your host, Seth Cotter.